I'm your host, Salman Hasan, and each week we sit down with remarkable individuals who are making their mark in their chosen fields. We highlight their successes and challenges in their journey, also examining corporate accountability within the industry and offer any actionable advice on career investment and ethical navigation to those who want to tread their path. And as a reminder to our listeners, you can find the show notes, resources, and also ways to connect with our guest speakers in the Treaded Path archive in kufiproductions.com. So today, I'm honored to be joined by Tazbia Fatima. Tazbia is the AI and Newsroom Engineer with Hearst Newspapers. She's part of the team that built an award-winning public meeting transcription tool called Assembly. Fatima also won a ton of awards, including being a recipient of the 2024 Magic Grant by the Brown Institute for Media Innovation, the Brown Toe Award for Excellence in Computational Journalism for her building of classification pipelines to track immigration from India, and the EWA National Award in 2024 for investigative and public reporting. So basically, she's super smart and winning a lot of awards for it, mashallah. So Tazbia, assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Walaikum assalam, and thank you for having
Yes,
me
of
on this
course,
podcast.
you're welcome. And before we dive into your story, could you, what's your favorite AI tool to use and why?
I think now in 2025 and 2026, it's Claude Code. So it's called Cursor. It's quite popular now. I've been using it since 2024 almost, and it's extremely powerful because it lets you build tools and prototype your ideas in minutes. You don't need any formal code training, and it's very easy to play with. So I've been using that a
Awesome.
lot.
I think a lot of people love Claude the Claude tool as well. So, um, I'm a fan of it as well. So, um, but so can you give our listeners a brief overview of what you do in your current role today?
Yeah, I think the main, as the title says, I do a lot of AI, but it's for the newsroom. So we're not building AI, we're not building LLMs, but what we're doing is we're using generative AI along with traditional machine learning techniques, which is classification, building models, etc., for data analysis for journalists. So we work right now, Hearst Newspapers works with multiple newspapers. So an example of that would be San Francisco Chronicle, or in Texas, there's a bunch actually now. Houston Chronicle, San Antonio Express News, and then some on the Northeast, which is Connecticut Insider, etc. So what we do is we have centralized all the AI and data analysis that they might need for projects that they don't have resources for, or that are more enterprise that we think can be expanded across all of our markets or newspapers. So we use LLMs to classify data, build alerting systems for our reporters so that they can do something called news in real time, because we know that journalism is a pretty low funded industry. It's more of a public service industry, and not one reporter can be everywhere. So we want them to get alerts on everything, including like airline information, flight trackers, earthquake trackers, just regular weather events, snowstorm alerts. We want them to be the first people to get the news as soon as the government launches it or releases the data. And so we build systems with databases, cloud, etc., along with AI to simplify and summarize the information, especially when the DOJ website went up, the Doge website went up. Sorry, not the DOJ. The Doge website went up. We knew that reporters can't spend all their day, just going through it. So we kind of got all the information from it, created like a database and a alerting system for our reporters. Whenever something new popped up on Doge, we alerted our reporters. So that's kind of primarily what I do every day, which is focus on making reporters' life easier. So do a lot of newsroom tooling. But we also use AI for something we called service journalism, which is tools and journalistic products from the newsroom that we think our readers can benefit from. And an example of that would be in Texas, we know that people can protest their property taxes a lot, and it's a big thing. In our community reporters have come back to us saying this is a big thing that our readers are very invested in. And so we used AI to kind of build a tool that they can enter all their information in, which is their house address, any issues, even small things like their foundation has cracks, or small things like there's always a leakage, or the trash collection is not great in their community, etc. So all of their grievances, everything, and we pass it through a lot of moderation checks using AI and build a script that they could use to essentially represent themselves, cutting a lot of the legal costs that would be involved in protesting your taxes. So making our readers a little bit more aware and knowledgeable, I think imparting knowledge in that way. So that's like a second kind of service journalism track we do. And then the third one is definitely investigative reporting. We work with reporters on analyzing thousands of PDFs for their leads, for the information that they need, so that everything is backed up in their reporting. So that's kind of the gist of what I do on my everyday. It's going to be
That's
a
a
mix
lot.
of
I
those.
mean, you're servicing a lot. It may seem pretty narrow to you, but in the bigger picture, you are servicing a lot of people on journalists and helping them do the work that they can do in the best way possible. What initially drew you to journalism and news reporting?
I think I would say, of course, I was back in India, and I was doing my engineering programs. I was studying CS for my undergrad, and there was always a sense of like giving back to the community or being involved in community. I think that was the baseline, and also I think as a Muslim, you want to work for yourself, of course, and for your career, but you also want to do something for the world, whether that's one person or you build something so fantastic that, I don't know, that helps a lot of people. Like YouTube, I think, helps a lot of people. Of course, there's a lot of side effects, but YouTube was started by a Muslim founder, and it helps so many people. So I think it was just that, seed of I got to do something. And I loved reading, and I loved reading the newspaper. In my home, we got 3 different languages of newspapers every single day, and 2 English dailies. And so it was just a very kind of like a part of my daily life already. And so when I kind of decided, okay, I need to level up further, I want to do my master's, I knew I wanted to do it in journalism. And I wanted to see if I should be doing ground reporting, which I had done in my undergrad for my university paper, or whether I should go into like tools and tooling. And a large part of the tools and tooling industry was hidden to me because that's not very spoken about. I think CS grads don't think about like, oh, I can actually go and build uh, CS tools for the newsroom. Um, so I think that was very hidden to me, and that I discovered when I was at my grad program. But that was the spark, and essentially, which is okay. You know, just I still believe in the value of
Yeah,
journalism. It is fact checked. No matter what anyone says, there's a lot of every newsroom has their own ethics guidelines, but overarchingly, in most, I would say, local newsrooms, they have very high ethical standards. And so that kind of drew me to it, just to be a part of the world. Yeah, I didn't want to be siloed in a tech job away
for
from the
sure.
world,
No,
just
and
building my
we'll
tools. Yeah.
get into the ethics part of the discussion later on. But going back to education, what challenges did you face during your education, if any? Whether it's you know the the subject matter of what you're learning, or the way if you faced any kind of uh, racism as a result of being Muslim, and in the or being trying to get into the industry that you're in. What were some of the challenges that you faced from college onwards?
Okay. So I'll go back to me being doing my undergrad in India. And a big part of why I did not practice journalism in India was because my parents were apprehensive about me being like a Muslim woman going into an industry that is known to, be very rigid and very demanding of your time, not having good work hours, and not being, you're going out in public, you're going to remote places. It is not, your safety is not always, it's not as safe as a desk job. And so that was, of course, something that we were apprehensive about. But I have now a lot of friends who have worked back home in other countries too that have been very safe. But that was, our initial kind of hesitation. But what I realized after coming to the US and, going to Columbia for my journalism degree is that you will eventually end up going to those remote places. If you had to do an, I know, um, during one of my reporting sessions for a class, I had to walk into a very empty public building in Harlem, and I was climbing up the stairs. Um, it was like the fourth or fifth store, and I was like, oh my god, if anything happens to anyone here, I
Right.
would have to really just race down. So those are all the things I've it's mostly about like you are putting yourself out there, you are going and talking to people, and that will always come with um I wouldn't say racism or even Islamophobia. Journalists in general are very inclusive
Yeah.
because they know a lot and they read a lot. And I think reading exposes you to so many cultures, and they're always traveling and they can see through things because they're always thinking about being the devil's advocate for anything that they read. So it is a very inclusive community. I did not face any apparent racism or Islamophobia as a result of being a Muslim, a hijabi from India. None of those have applied to me. But I will say though, when you're in a job and you're doing well, nothing is hampered. You're fine. You're going to get your promotions if you do well. You're going to be able to figure out, you're going to be able to get funding. But I would say networking, because being in the so journalists hustle a lot. It's not a very standard pathway. It's not a standard pathway of like, okay, I have one job and then I will just do 3 4 5 years here and move on, because every journalist has their own personal projects that they want to do. Either we want to report on something or we want to build something, and so we're constantly doing side projects. And this is true for almost every journalist I know who has at some point in their life always um, thought about I do think that it's a very existential industry where everyone's thinking about, who am I, what am I
Right.
giving back? A lot of us are thinking of that. And so in those times when you're networking, I think you do feel you need to have some level of excellence to overshadow your background or your um, accent, I would say. I come from an international background, so my accent is not exactly American. So I think when we were networking for our projects is when we kind of faced a little bit of the initial networking hitch. But otherwise, once they know you have something solid or you have done something solid, it yeah, it works out. I will say the journalism industry is pretty small compared to, if you want to compare it to like the tech industry, just by the scale of the number of people. So a lot of people know each other, or have worked with each other in some capacity or have met at some conferences. So it's very important you're kind of on top of your game, whether it's your projects or your networking. But at the end of the day, I've realized that your work speaks a lot. Um, and that can also lead to like a very competitive nature between journalists. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't think that has
Can
affected
you
me so far.
No, that's great. And
Yeah.
we'll also, talk a little bit about like how one can, enter the field, uh, a field of journalism. If they just came out of college, or they want to switch careers. But going back to you again in your journey, was there a pivotal moment that significantly shaped like your trajectory, your career trajectory, and who you are today? Was there one moment, or are there multiple moments? Could you what do you think?
Yeah. I just going back to the previous question just for a quick second, I think one thing that I would be remiss to not mention would be um, international students face a lot of visa issues
Yes.
while job hunting in journalism, because it's not a big, well-funded industry. It's not like finance or tech, or that can readily sponsor you. So that is something that I would be remiss to say, that visa is an issue, and they would readily, give the project to someone who has a visa and can, or work eligibility. But just to come back on this, was there like a pivotal moment in my career? I think not one pivotal moment, but there were like a series of, I would say, conviction, points of conviction in my moments of conviction in my journey that kind of told me that I'm on the right path. I want to just say uh, three of those. I think the first one was definitely doing a good grad program, because then you're surrounded by people and professors who are excellent, highly motivated, and hustle hard. Like I think the Columbia program, I say it killed me. It was really tough. It's very fast paced, and you're doing multiple things. Because you're learning journalism, you're doing multiple kinds of journalism. You're doing reporting, writing, audio, video journalism. But I want to say that struggle and that kind of exploration phase really taught me everything I need to know. I came in like an outsider from a tech background, and it was like I was switching the industry. So I would say just being there was one. I remember having, I just called my dad once and being like, okay, I finally know what it feels like to do what you love. Because that, even though it was tough, it was kind of pivotal because I got that realization that, okay, I am in the right industry. And that conviction changes everything, because now you're not scrambling to see that, oh, did I do the right thing? Or my kind of search for my industry ended there. And so that was really important for me, because then I could focus on improving myself in this industry. The second pivotal moment was when, your thesis, I would say, and this is for more people who are already in grad school or in their grad, your thesis or your main project that you're doing is very extremely important, because you can go all in on it. And in my cohort, I realized I was very passionate about the topic that I found because it related to me back home. Like I studied migration from India that is not in the traditional
Right.
routes of like finding a job or getting an education in the US. And so because there was like something I could relate to, something that I deeply cared about, and I sat through long meetings with my advisors, both American, one Indian American, so who could understand some of the culture of why are people even migrating, why do we love to migrate from South Asia to the US. But that kind of teaches you that when something matters to you, your energy in that project is different. And your kind of careers are long, they're very long, but days are short, and you don't want to spend your days doing something you don't love. That is what kind of leads
Yeah.
to burnout. At least it has for me in the past. That was pivotal for me because I really realized that, okay, I might have a great project and great idea. You really have to be able to convince the people who are editing your project or funding your project. And that is extremely important. Um, and it is a very long learning experience because you do your thesis over a long period. And that is very important on how you can even sustain a project. So I would say it wasn't like one day where I just woke up and I was like, oh, this
Right.
is
Right.
great. This is my calling. But it was this series of learnings that I found my industry. Then I found that, okay, this is what I need if I want to be able to do independent projects. And then I think the third pivotal role was when I got my first internship. I started out of my grad school with an internship. And towards the end of my grad program, I was kind of in a limbo because I was studying journalism, I was studying CS, but they have a very very clear intersection and a very big intersection, but there's not many jobs there and not many people who can know what you can bring to the team, right? And that was a very confusing period for me in my life where I was like, I know I can do the data reporting, I don't have the experience to back it because I'm new to the industry, or I know I can do the traditional reporting, but will I miss my CS skills in the future? Because once you go the traditional reporting route, you kind of end up going that way. You do local reporting, investigative reporting, and very few people, you just have to then take a break and shift to data journalism again. And data journalism is essentially you're using public data sets or you're building data sets by collecting data from the agencies or governments or putting together multiple data sets, etc. So I was in a very confusing period. I was interviewing with a lot of great companies, going to the final round. There was one interview rejection where he was like, "You're excellent. You're really smart, and you have all these skills that I would love and we need in the industry, but I don't know where to place you in my team." And that was a big realization. I was like, "Okay, so
Yeah.
that is my problem." Because I was getting rejection after rejection, and everyone was like so nice to me, and I was getting calls for interviews, so I was very happy about that. But then it was also like they were also like, we just don't know what to do with you. And when you're in a cycle of looking for a job and you can't pinpoint on what's going wrong, it gets really tough to do anything
Yeah.
to fix it. So then I started, then I just started looking at, okay, I had done a little bit of generative AI work this is 2023 or December 2022. So that's when ChatGPT 3.5 or ChatGPT as we all know it had launched and everyone was using it actively. And because of it was kind of
Yeah.
the right place, right time kind of a thing where I had the CS skills to understand it and actually implement it and prototype stuff, and the journalism ethics and kind of editorial vision to know that, hey, this is actually going to be a terrible project and our readers are going to hate us and our trust in our newsroom is going to go down. So it was that. And then when I interviewed for my first internship, um, it was, my mentor and my direct manager who was like, his name's Scott Klein. He used to work at ProPublica for a very long time. He kind of told me that, hey, you have the AI skills, so just do what you want. I trust you. And I think that was really important because he could have said that, hey,
Yeah,
like, let's just get some stories out because that will be good, important readership for us. But he was like, just do your thing. I want to see how you can experiment. And he had the vision. So meeting someone with a vision in the industry and who can put where to place me, who can understand where to place me in the team, uh, I think changed everything for me. So if I had to pick one pivotal moment, I would pick the
that's
last one.
huge when you have somebody who truly has your back and full support of what you want to do truly with the skill sets that you've acquired over the years. That's transformative, right? And you can really put in your best
Yeah.
effort at that point. So speaking of transformative, right? In our podcast, we talk a lot about how our deen, our faith, and our professional lives intersect, right? And how we, um, I guess, use the faith to be able to transform our career journey to be better, right? So, and and also, I want to point out that there are not a lot of journalists who are Muslim, and much less Muslim female, and even less that a Muslim female hijabi, right? So as you go down the demographics, the that bucket gets smaller and smaller. But with that said, though, does that does the faith in your deen empower you at all and help guide some of your decision making and the career choices that you make?
100%, because I think as someone who wants to very closely follow their faith, when you're making decisions on, is this the right project to do? Is this ethical? Am I harming someone here? These are all stemming from the, Islamic values of being kind to people, spreading good, doing good and not evil in the world. So I think there's always that, you don't want to scam people. You don't want to do it for the views. You don't want to, um, especially when it comes to international affairs reporting. I don't work very closely with international affairs reporting as others do, which is basically reporting on war crimes or wars internationally. That is when a lot of that rhetoric and the shaping of the narrative comes in. I'm not at that stage. But I do feel like we need more inclusive, more Muslim people who are in that level, at that level, so that the narrative is not shaped by others' values. And so for me in my career, whenever I have to make a decision, you do think about, like, what does this mean? For example, when we were discussing a project on how to, um, you know, classify people's accents by cities in the US, we kind of had to go back and be like, or say that, how New Yorker do you sound, right? But we had to go back and be like, wait a minute, but New York is a melting pot of cultures and people come with their own backgrounds and first languages and mother tongues, as we say it in South Asia. And what are we telling our audience? Is this bordering on racist reporting? And so all of this is these ethical guidelines that you follow, that they do come from faith. They do come from faith, and it is very easy, um, once you start a more of a tech plus journalism and integration, to get lost in the tech side of it and not think of the editorial. But you have to, it's for me, it's been like a constant of, like, I have to remind myself, okay, what am I doing for the world, right? Sometimes I'm just doing my desk job and I'm like, who is even using this tool? But it's important to know that this is a journey to get you where you want. So just asking that question helps me understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and all the things that come
Absolutely,
with it. Yeah.
absolutely. While it's the, each individual's work is very important, it's all part of the collective, in the society, right? That we're trying to build and make the world a better place, inshallah. So so now pivoting over to the industry that you're in, right? Want to talk about what biggest challenges have you seen, or is the industry currently facing right now? I know you said you're not on the investigative or the international reporting side of things, but you could talk about the industry as a whole, or where you're mostly focused on, what are some of those biggest challenges that you see happening right now?
I would say, yeah, I'm not on the international affairs reporting side of it right now, but we're always keeping up to date with all the information, the critics, as well as I have a lot of friends who do international reporting and are actively covering Gaza and Iran and Ukraine even. So I think there's a lot to fix in any industry, but this one in journalism in particular, I think we really need to work. There's a lack of trust and transparency in journalism that people are facing, and it is it's a multi-pronged problem. One is of course coming from newsrooms who are hell-bent on their own narrative and ignoring the
Right.
communities their audiences come from, right? And just as an example of that, if they have a very I don't want to say right wing or left wing leaning narrative, but if their narrative is not aligning with, um, how do I put this right? in, in New York, we're all pretty much accepting of each other's cultures and backgrounds and religions and faiths and beliefs, and so are humans overall. And I would like to believe in overall in the world. There's a very small percentage of people in the world who are actually very rigid in their exclusionary practices and beliefs towards people of other race, religion, gender, and etc. So when the journalism industry and certain newsrooms kind of start to tailor their narrative towards their funders and investors who kind of are part of that 1% or 2% exclusionary people, the audience will know there's a
You're right.
dissonance. You will know. And so there's a constant lack of trust. And when people, so that is one big problem. And newsrooms that I know, especially local newsrooms, citywide newsrooms, they're really working hard to build it and provide to their teams and cover everything in a more ethical journalistic practice way. I would say the second biggest challenge that we face is funding. And I tell this to whoever I meet, which is that I know we do public service, and especially as someone coming from the tech industry, which I know is pretty well funded for the most part and continues to be funded. um, I know we are in public service jobs and we all love the fact that we are doing something for the community, but we should not be, journalists should not always be
Right.
hustling. There's a lot of investment that needs to come in because we also need more people on the ground. As someone who's working in AI very closely on a daily basis, I know the importance of like reporter. I tell this to everyone I meet, which is a newsroom only needs a reporter, an editor, a publisher, maybe a
You're right.
photographer, right? And it's just the human work that is most valuable because you are able to observe in real time. They are able to gather information from people, the opinion from people, and they are able to say it like it is.
You're right.
Versus we are trying to gather all of these data sets and then we're just saying that, oh, overall, there's a snowstorm that came up last weekend in the US. Okay, but the real implications of it, you get to see that from your local reporting, from your local correspondence, not from an AI data visualization of the snowstorm. You don't know what it means to be covered by 20 inches of snow in Boston. So all of this requires people on the ground and people in the newsrooms. And there's a lack of a business model, I would say, that provides funding. Even people who do excellent personal projects, you can, and one of my colleagues and what we won the Brown Institute Master Grant for was that we have there's a court cases in India are extremely delayed, and I want to say by decades. There are some court cases that have been running for 40 years, 60 years, and this is all public information. These are criminal cases. These are either people are incarcerated falsely without a conviction and they are languishing in prison, or people are not getting justice because the actual accusers have not been convicted and are out on bail. And so there's like a lack of justice, or a delay in justice. This is all public information. Nobody talks about it. Nobody finds it. And so one of the jobs that we did with that project was to make the publicly available data more accessible to the public in a way that they will understand. They will not understand that the court case started in 1961. They will understand that, oh, it's lacking for 50 years now and what happened there. And so doing that work is also a journalist's job. And it came from the idea of my colleague. Her name's Shalaka Shande. She's based out of India now. But because she went day in and day out to courts as a reporter, she could ideate a project that would help a nation of like what 1.2 billion people. And so it's very important to have those people. And even for that, we had that funding for a year, but we are in the process of finding funding for not a VC process in journalism. It is not, it is a very much you're based on the handful of philanthropic institutes that will give you money to continue to do that important work. And this is just one project that is pitched out of hundreds that is in, thousands that are there. And people do very important um, informative information for people. And ultimately, the goal of journalism is to give all the information to the reader so they can make better choices for themselves in their lives and have a better understanding of the world. So I think that is a second issue, which is the lack of a business and just the lack of money in the pipelines here is a big problem that I don't think people outside the industry understand. So one is, of course, what was the first one? One was, of course, trust in journalism. Second one is, of course, the business of journalism, as we call it. And I think the third is, we can go on and on about this, and there is enough representation, but there's a phenomenon called the news
Mm,
deserts. There are places in the U.S. and all over the world where there's not that we are not covering, that we are simply not covering. We are not sending people to there. Nobody wants to go to, I don't know, remote part of Idaho to cover the information there. And there's probably not much to cover also, but it is important information for the people that live there. And when you don't get information from mainstream outlets, how do I say,
yeah.
the shared truth reduces, because then you're getting information from, I don't know, your local mosque or your local church or synagogue, or you're getting your information from content from TikTok or Instagram, right? Which is not fact checked. And especially with like AI generated videos and imagery now, it is a little bit difficult to kind of even for me to tell what is AI and what is not. And so it is important for every one of us to have the shared truth of the world. That does not mean that people should not have opinions. We should have the shared facts of like, okay, this is what happened. If a policeman shot a person during a chase, what were the exact chain of events? That is our shared truth. Opinions come after that. So I think that is these news deserts are a challenge that we're facing in our local newsrooms, and it again goes back to like funding, etc. But having people who can join the industry and go out there and do this important work is, I think, a challenge that we're facing. I wouldn't say AI is taking jobs in news, because AI cannot do a journalist's job. AI can do my job; it can code, but it cannot do like a reporter's on ground work. So I don't think it's replacing it. I will say though, the industry is
Yeah.
funding AI projects a lot more. So that is equal parts concerning, equal parts exciting, because we need investment. We need the industry to focus on all areas that we need to. But yeah, I would say those are the three big kind of
Sure. No,
issues that
that's
stand out to me.
really well summarized and well put. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on citizen journalism, if you will, right? Um, and the use of social media, right? Because as you said, um, not a lot of the news that you receive to whichever medium is fact checked, right? Which is very important because you want to make sure you get the facts right, right? And separating facts from opinions. Um, what's your take on the use of social media as uh, as a s- as a means of news reporting and collecting news? Because as you know, a lot of people, um, they put a lot of emotion into social media, content that's out there. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So there's a technique in the journalism world and also in the civil tech world, which is it's called OSINT, open source
Mm,
investigative reporting technique, and they basically use open source openly available information, and that includes citizen journalism accounts of when something happens. For example, when there was an explosion in Gaza or bombing in Gaza, and a lot of I can name the newsrooms that work in this field. There's one is Bellingcat, one is New York Times Visual Investigations team, there is BBC's investigative team. Then I know largely works in this. I know Washington Post does a little bit of investigative visual technique work, and there's one more in Spotlight. Yeah, I think it is Spotlight. It's based out of Europe, and they also do excellent. No, it's not Spotlight. Spotlight PA is based out of Pennsylvania. That's
Lighthouse
Lighthouse
reports.
Reports,
Okay.
based out of Europe, and they do excellent open source investigative work. And so they use citizen journals account, but they don't use for information collection or news collection, right? There are people, of course, at a news, at the bombing. And so they use the videos to identify the location, to geolocate and provide the information to, the reporters. But also what that helps when you do geolocation is then you can use a host of other tools to actually build the chain of events. You can use satellite imagery. There are lots of companies that newsrooms pay for their work, and they can provide you minute by minute account of imagery of what exactly happened. And so for that bombing, there was in one of the videos there was a billboard of a supermarket in Arabic, and so two people kind of got to work on it to identify which supermarket is this, how many branches do they have, where do we think this one is. So they do use a lot of open source information. Another example was the city NYC is a nonprofit newsroom in New York. And one of the ideas they were doing was that we saw in our database, in our regular data set, that police car chases were causing more pedestrian mortalities
Wow.
than no. Yeah, so that information exists, it's real. And the idea was that, okay, we want to rebuild these what the chain of events in these car chases, and the way we try to use information was either use public CCTVs that a lot of shops have that are facing the sidewalks, or use internet accounts from those dates. And so it's the idea is there's a lot of use. And there is another one in it's based out of Chicago and in many other Midwest. Now it is called the Documenters Network. And what they do is they send citizen journalists with their phones and their notepads, probably on their phones, to meetings to get all the information from the meeting. And then they come back and they have one editor. So this editing process, I want to say, is important. Even if we use citizen journalism, I think there are a lot of people who are very well equipped to shoot and capture and are very willing to do it. And so tapping into that is important, and they could also be properly trained. But that editorial process, that editing process is important, so that the news that comes in when we are giving it back to our readers, it has a structure.
Right.
Right. And a lot of it has structure. And Wall Street Journal does a lot of work with TikTok vertical accounts, and they embed that in their stories. So there's a small section that we use, but to actually start including citizen journalists on our kind of staff, that could be
No, for
interesting.
sure.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting process because and very important process, the editing process, because uh you want to make sure that you're not misconstruing the story that's happening on the ground, right? And what the people are hearing at after the whole, after completing the whole process. Um, so
Yeah.
s- so with that in mind, I want to switch over to a little bit onto the accountability and ethics side of things. You were mentioning earlier that journalists are the most inclusive group of people, or the industry that exists, and especially the local newsroom journalists. They're very ethical. In comparison to some of the other types of journalists, including some of the international affairs reporting, local journalists they they run by ethics a lot more, right? Which is good because you know if a journalist is not run on ethics, that's a clear red flag, right? So in your opinion, how can journalists from within advocate for more accountability, right? And it sounds like a kind of an odd question to ask because journalists should be the ones to be like holding others accountable, right? Because of the fact that they're uh, on the ground or collecting data and a source, from different sources to to maintain that level of accountability. But oftentimes we see that, especially on the international affairs side of things, there's a huge lack of accountability, right? And also that stems from the fact that they're very because of the people that fund, where they get their funding, right? From the 1%. So my question to you, or go back to the question, is how can we advocate for more accountability in that sense?
No, I think the question you raise is very spot on. Like journalists need to hold each other accountable. We can't give a free pass just because someone is journalist. And I think it's very important where I've looked at headlines from the New York Times about Gaza, and I've just been like, who approved this? Because I know there has to be like a solid like line of people who have approved it, but and sometimes in the rush of breaking the news, we know that steps are skipped. But we saw that from inside, from within the industry, there have been all the schools, all the journalism schools, especially Columbia, has stood up, whether it's to its own, university or to outsiders, and has kind of opened um, themselves up like a um, supporter of the
Right.
First Amendment, right? And calls out problematic reporting. Because there has been many. This is not the first time in the world that there is problematic rhetoric, racist rhetoric, and how do I say it? It's more of a differential treatment towards different sides of the story, which is not a journalistic value,
Right.
right? Right. And it's very important that we speak up about it. And there have been a lot of like internal kind of conferences about like, okay, how we got here, how to not get there. And I think that is important because you're shaping the next generation of journalists to think critically. It's also very important for journalists to speak to each other within their own teams, and they do. A lot of them do, but I would say having more well-meaning people at the higher level, at the editorial level, at the strategy level, and having more diversity there, diversity of ethnicity, of race, of religion. Especially, I encourage women, Muslim women, and anyone I know who I know is a well-meaning individual, who I know has strong personal values to kind of go up to that level. And it's very important they come from that. A lot of the strategies also they come from another industry. Actually, they come from the MB, from their MBA grads. And so it's important to also take a look at like who is actually running our newsrooms and where are they coming from? Are they coming?
Sorry, finish your
Yeah.
thought, and then I was going to add a follow-up question.
Okay. So where they're coming from. And I think internally we've had a lot of, signing of letters to editors, to boards, to management, and resignations. And people, honestly, I've known of people who have rejected jobs at these really prestigious news companies. It's everyone's dream. At one point, it's a very hard to get job also, but I know of people who have rejected it because it doesn't align with their values. Letting the company know that, hey, your values don't align with me. I did the whole interview process with you, but I'm like rejecting you because you don't align with me. And I think that kind of constant hammering is what's going to help uh at one point. Yeah. So I think within the industry, that's
That's a
what
great
we're all
response,
doing, right?
and I'm glad you pointed that out. Because my follow-up question was, journalists, they try to do their unbiased reporting, right? But if you agree, I think at some level there's always going to be some level of bias because of the values that they have to align with, right? Whether it's their personal values or the company values or some of the ethics that have been laid out, by the industry. So my question to you is, do you think do you is it truly possible to be to to have unbiased reporting, right? Because there's always some kind of agenda, right? And so it, or let me put it this way: when you're doing the factor, when you're doing the reporting, is it enough to just report the facts, or is it critical to have your opinions after that, right? Like what's you have all these facts, what does that all mean, right? So what do you think?
Yeah. I want to say a lot of reporting is actually unbiased. It's usually the 2, 3 standout articles that come across as extremely that are just biased, to be honest, and have a very harmful rhetoric in their headlines. And headlines are practically what everyone reads these days. Nobody actually reads the story. And almost every reporting is followed up with kind of contextualizing. Every reporter, so opinion journalism is different. Reporters don't add their own opinion, but they add
Right.
context to their stories. So say I was talking about the migration of India to the US and the numbers and everything, but I had to add the context of like, why are Indians doing this, right? Like, what is the meaning behind it, and what does this migration mean to them, and what are the harm, like, so there I'm not adding. When I say that something is an American dream, I'm not supporting it. I'm not condoning it or condemning it, but I'm adding the context that, hey, for them, for the people who are coming, it is their American dream, and the American readers might not get it. But that is where I come in to kind of explain where it came from, the history of it, the contextualizers. In every news story, if you see, the first information is basically called the lead, which is what happened, who, what, where, when, why. And then there most often comes a context graph. It's called the nut graph. And that is very important. And it's very important to not mix opinion journalism with regular journalism, journalistic structure. Although, of course, I'm sure there are regular news structure can be reformed to better serve our audiences today, and not one from like the 60s or the 70s. But opinion journalism is something that needs to be very strictly not regarded as journalism. That has been my pain point all this time, which is we see all these articles about like, why the war is happening, or why some XYZ is happening. We see all of that, but you should notice that a lot of those articles are opinion journalism
Yeah.
articles that are coming from not reporters, but actually opinion writers. They're not called journalists, they're called opinion writers. And they are probably experts in their field, have done some kind of analysis, international affairs or political analysis, but they are at the end of the day opinion pieces, and their headlines should, like, read the it's called media literacy. It's very important for our audience to be able to distinguish fact check reporting, breaking news, opinion journalism, and there's after the event kind of analysis that comes up, which is usually actually spot on and can help people shape their minds, which usually talks about like, okay, just take Gaza, for example, right? This New York Times that produces those opinion articles is also the same media outlet that does the visual investigations. They come out a couple of weeks later, 2, 3 weeks later, but they actually show that the craters that were formed by the bomb are way larger than what was reported and have impacted a lot of people. So you are getting objective reporting and fact check reporting from there, and opinion articles, as well as um, har- um, you know harmful um, rhetorics in breaking news articles from there. So it's important. Like, media literacy is becoming more and more important, and it's very important rather for the readers to, rather than reject the whole journalism industry as a whole, being like, oh, journalists always have an agenda, or every newsroom has an agenda. It's very important for them to know what to read and what to ignore. And it's unfortunate. And we talk about this a lot within the industry, which is like, we don't like that this onus is now on the readers, and it should be on
Yeah.
the industry, and it should not be on the readers, but it is right now. And media literacy will go a long way. So it is like,
Yeah.
it is unfortunate, but that is how it's going right now. But most of the reporting that you see will be unbiased, except New York
Yeah,
Times
no,
covering
I'm so glad you
wars.
brought up media literacy, and I definitely have to agree with the the fact that continuous learning and, just being educated in general is so important, right? And like you were saying, knowing the difference between what's an opinion piece and the work by journalists and investigative journalism and all the different kinds of journalism is really important and would help the reader um, make much more informed decisions, right, from that. Um, and and yes, it is unfortunate that the onus is on the reader versus the industry, um, because most of the readers out there, they're not media literate. They just take what's there at face value and then form their opinions and their ideas from there. So speaking of education, I wanna talk a little bit about what are some resources that you recommend for someone who would like to enter the world of journalism, or at least be more knowledgeable in how to become a journalist, right? Also, any specific skills or certifications that you think are crucial to be able to enter, right? Whether they're a new college grad or seasoned professional who wants to switch industry, what would you recommend?
I would say that before, journalism industry, as small as it is, it has a lot of verticals. And so getting a knowledge of that, whether that's through Google or whether that's through, I don't know of many courses on, like, these platforms like Coursera or Udemy on journalism, but I'm sure there will be some. If not, following just going to a a journalism conference, I would say that would be the best place to start, because you are then meeting or attending one of these events at universities, which are almost always public. Columbia Journalism does a lot of public events. You have to sign up for them, and and everything, of course, but these are actual talks by journalists on how they did their projects, or there's a panel where we're discussing AI in the news, or how AI is impacting the news, or there's a panel on war coverage, and there's a panel on ethics and journalism, and where then the business of journalism. I think finding these talks in your cities, every major newsroom in every state and every college, there's so many great journalism colleges, especially in the US. There's Columbia in New York, there's CUNY in New York, the City University of New York. It's fantastic. They have a fantastic program. NYU has a media program that is very prominent. There is Northwestern, it's excellent. There is, what's that one in DC? There's one in DC that's a really good journalism school. Then there's, of course, the Stanford has an excellent journalism school. But I would say, if you're new, if you've done your grad and you're kind of in your career already, then I would say go to these events, because you'll meet people there. You can always like go up to a professor who was conducting that event and be like, hey, I'm interested. Are there any like weekend classes or another workshop I could attend? And I think that is a great place to start, because one, you're building network, which is important. Two, you're getting to know what journalism looks like. It's very important to know what reporting looks like, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, yeah,
Reporting, video, writing, etc. And if you're a photographer who wants to, if you're in the more of a visual space, I think go to your local newsroom, go to their local news office, and tell them you're up for an assignment. I think local news always appreciates photographers and videographers and is very open to them. And so if you want to pivot that way, I think they will give you one-off assignments, and that can build your portfolio. For, I think, grad students and undergrad students, I would really, really recommend getting connected with their university or college newspaper or magazine and start working there. That's how most of us, and most of my colleagues also, the first jobs that they did, the first introduction to media is always their college newspaper or their university newspaper. So get in touch there. One, you'll be getting a lot of like you'll build your
yeah.
portfolio, which is important in
Right.
journalism more than a degree. Like an undergrad with a good amount of reporting is and equally eligible for the same job as a grad student with a little less experience. So I think this industry really values experience and to show your work. And so when you are able to do that and have those connections. So for students, I would say I wouldn't recommend any any courses per se. For students, I would recommend they go to a journalism conference. The one that I frequent is by investigative reporters. I don't know what the E stands for, but it's by IRE. And they have two conferences a year. One is NICAR, which is a data and journalism conference. And then there's another one, which is investigative and international reporting conference. So both of them, one happens in March, one happens in May, June. So that is, I think, very valuable source to get all the information. There's a ton of sessions over 4 days, and get in touch with your newspapers. And for people who want to like get into the industry, know what it is. If you're coming from the tech side, I would say AI skills are very hot right now. So if you have even prototyped something using generative AI, plus bring something from your tech experience, whether that's you're able to build infrastructure, that's cloud, or you're really good at coding, programming, or you're a great project manager and can manage tech products, it's we call them newsroom products. And so if you're able to kind of join those teams or the R&D teams of the newsrooms and reach out to your local journalists on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever they're posting, journalists are almost always happy to talk or get connected with your local college. And I think for people who are coming from the more strategy and business side, I think I would just ask them to network, get to know other people who are already in the industry, or have an idea of their own and get one of these grants, which is like the Magic Grant by Brown. They give great funding for projects, and the projects can be very creative and media oriented or journalism oriented. Knight Foundation gives a lot of funds of like $1,000 to $5,000, and sometimes even more for your project. So if you have an idea and you think you can, there's another one called Hacks and Hackers. They always have conferences and workshops and hackathons everywhere in multiple cities. They keep touring, so they are a good resource. But yeah, just find your local newsrooms and local university colleges, journalism colleges, and get connected there. I think that would be a way better score than any skill than any certificate you can bring in
So that's
journalism.
a wonderful response. A lot of good resources to take advantage of if if you're a new student or you're just graduated or wherever you are in your journey. There's a lot to take advantage of. Alhamdulillah. Um, so before we wrap up, right? Wanna I want to ask you, right? What legacy or this is a two-part question here. So first part is, how do you define success for yourself? Being in the work that you're doing right now, and what legacy do you hope to leave? Um, you know, for the world.
That's an intense question. I would say success for me, it keeps changing at different stages of life. When I was in my grad program, success for me was like getting into the top kind of news company and doing great work. I think uh, now the dream has shifted a little bit more. It is about doing the work that drives me and supports journalism. And today it looks like building AI tools for our reporters and helping them. I think tomorrow, while I was doing my thesis, it looked, I had this very strong conviction of like, okay, I'm bringing a story to the audience that is important, and we need to like talk about this because it's perilous for a lot of people. I think later on in life, it might look like teaching. It might look like doing more probably global coverage. It might look like doing a project in India for a couple of months that works with, um, you know, both in the urban and rural cities there for them. So I think for me, it's changing. I think ultimately for me, success in my career is going to be about um, being content with what I'm doing. I think contentment is something so valued in our faith also. I think being content with the hours that I'm spending at doing something. Um, so I think it ultimately my goal now is to continue to do things that drive me and yeah, from my heart. And in terms of legacy that I want to leave behind, I haven't thought that much. I still consider myself uh, very fresh in the industry to think about legacy. But I do think that I hope to be able to, do work that brings something to light, provides information to people, but also inspire young women to dream big, especially from South Asia, from India, from South India. I'm from Hyderabad. Inspire them to dream big and dream not just young women but men also to think about their careers as helping themselves and others. And but and then whatever they choose, they might end up choosing acting, but there's also, you could do a lot more with storytelling. You could do so much with storytelling, and it is an active part of the way our society works. And you could choose to completely like be a mechanical engineer, be a mechanic, and there is something for you there too. So just thinking about anything that they're doing in terms of their career, and like, okay, how do I give back? Maybe not today, but in the next 5 years or 10 years. Maybe maybe I'm in consulting and I don't have the time to think about like the problems of the world. Um, but okay, maybe you are going to be the one to be able to do a lot more charity in the next couple of years. So
Nice,
I think
nice.
that lens. And I hope to have that
Inshallah,
lens too.
inshallah.
Yeah.
Um, so mashallah, it seems not it seems you do have a whole wealth of knowledge when it comes to journalism in the industry, it and the use of AI as well, and your combination of tech and reporting is very powerful, and I'm sure a lot of people would regard you as a very good mentor. So if you're up for mentoring somebody, what's the best way someone can reach out to you?
I would say reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm most responsive there. You can also just email me via LinkedIn. I like use LinkedIn just as much as I use Instagram or other social media. So I think that is the best
Okay,
way to
awesome.
reach
Sounds
me.
good. Tasbih, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that I haven't, or we haven't discussed today?
No, I would say that, if you are someone who does not believe in the journalism industry, I understand you. I feel you. I would suggest you go find, go and take another look at all those newspapers and digital publications and uh, civic tech, civil tech websites that give so much information. You'll learn so much about the world. You can, there's something called the pudding.com. They do really quirky visualizations. I don't know if you've seen it, Salman, but do extremely quirky visualizations, but with excellent data points. Um, just I would
Eh,
recommend go looking it up. It will really hook you because it's exciting. And from there you can go, but I would suggest that go look at the data and visualization teams of your local newsrooms, the nationwide newsrooms, your statewide newsrooms, and I think they are great places to start. They're almost always fact checked, and try to read less opinion journalism.
okay, sounds good. And what a wonderful way to wrap it up. Alhamdulillah, so Fatima, thanks so much for sharing your journey with us today. Your professional journey and insights will definitely resonate with our listeners as it has for me. So alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. And until next time, we'll see you again, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Treaded Path podcast. You can find all the resources our guests mentioned in the Treaded Path archive in our website, coffeeproductions.com, along with the links to connect with our guest speakers. If today's conversation inspired you or helped you in your own professional journey, we'd love to hear from you. So please leave us a review, share the episode with someone who might benefit, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. May your treaded path be blessed and full of wisdom. Assalamu alaikum.